Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to continue our series on NFL draft prospects. We're now looking at edge rushers and outside linebackers and 5-tech defensive ends in a 3-4 defense. Welcome in, Keith.
Yeah, so we're looking at edge guys, mainly pass rushers in this episode of the show. Lots of fast guys on the outside linebackers, and a few bigger guys, but are still not up the middle pass rushers, more around the edge guys, even if they are a little bigger.
Like Uchenna Nwasu types.
Yeah, that is the Seahawk of note at that position. Darrell Taylor also comes to mind, who had a rough first half of the year, but then exploded in the second half to actually tie Nwasu in sacks. So
how do you evaluate our own roster? I mean, how much do we really need to address this position, especially high in the draft?
You can never have enough pass rushers, especially high end good ones. I think that this team has with Nwasu on one side and Taylor on the other, and then you've got Robinson, who missed last year because of injury, but was great the year before, coming back. And then Boye Mafe is also in the mix. So you've got 4 guys that you really like, but you can never have enough. I think they need one more as an edge guy, and it wouldn't hurt to get him not at the top of the draft. I mean, obviously, if you really love Will Anderson and he's sitting there at 5, and you decided not to go quarterback, you could do worse than that. Yeah. But I've got them taking, a pass rusher somewhere in the first 5 picks, which I know is like, okay, that's 5 different picks, but that's all. Sure. All of those are in the top 85. So,
and you've got to allow the draft to come to you. I mean, the big board is the big board, and mm-hmm. You've got your players ranked. You've got those players in the draft also ranked against your own players, and if they can improve and it falls in line with where the way the draft's falling to them, sure, absolutely, could be pick number 5, could be pick 20, could be dropping back a little bit, pick up an additional pick. There's plenty of guys to choose from. I think in the first 2 or 3 rounds, it's pretty well loaded. So you have your choice really at the Seahawks with 5 picks in the top 100, probably come out of the draft with 6 in the top 100. I would absolutely almost guarantee that they come away with a pass rusher. Now, whether that's a base defensive end, a guy that's 275 pounds, or it's a edge rusher specialist type at 245, 250 pounds. That remains to be seen.
Yeah.
All right.
And we'll see. So, but yeah, there's, this is a good draft class to need a pass rusher. And when you don't need a pass rusher and you can kind of wait and, find one in the middle rounds, that can still be productive. Yeah, it's not a bad place to be there either. Mm-hmm. And so I like this draft class in terms of its edge rushers. I think it's a good one.
I do too, which is in line with what Seattle needs, especially, I would say at the 5-tech with Darrell Taylor and Nwasu there, and then Boye Mafe, that side, you really could use another guy to create a really nice, fearsome foursome. And then of course, I think, we've talked about the idea of needing a guy on the inside too at 3-tech and nose tackle. Mm-hmm. That seems to me to be a priority, but that's not necessarily where the draft lines up for Seattle. It's kind of, if it falls in line for you and you've got a chance to pick a guy at those positions, I think you do if you're Seattle, but you never know how the draft's going to unfold. So with that said, Keith, this thing starts with Will Anderson.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Will Anderson spent a big chunk of the year as the number one ranked prospect. I think consensus right now has him at 2 behind his teammate, Bryce Young at quarterback, but an elite prospect player, just phenomenal off the edge. Great bend, explosiveness, uses his hands well. Guy's going to be a force on day one in the NFL.
I think that if there's one player that I know for sure that Seattle would stay at 5 and take, it would be Will Anderson. He's just a perfect fit for them, a 3-4 outside linebacker, hand in the ground guy, 6'4", 235 pounds, little on the light side, but runs a 4.6 40, just a workhorse, a dynamic leader.
He ran a 4.6 40 and it didn't look like he was trying that hard.
Yeah. Well, so, I was going to ask you about the workout at the combine. Of course, that's not the tell when you take a look at his tape. He's just all over the place, and then very instrumental for Alabama's defense. But at the combine, he just seemed like another guy.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, you're not being an elite athlete doesn't guarantee NFL success. It just makes it easier. He clearly, you watch his tape and he is a force, and he's a force against the top offenses in the nation. And so I'm not concerned about any of that. It felt more like he knew his draft position was set and was doing what he had to do, but not at the same time, not really pushing, and risking injury or anything like that. So I think it was, I'm not all that concerned, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, still super athletic, and it comes down to work ethic. I think in the NFL when you're at this position, and he has that disposition as well as natural leadership qualities. I think Pete Carroll would definitely be drawn to this guy. I'm sure he's interviewed well. All indications are that he has across the league. And if you're going to take him, you got to take him at 5. I mean, he's not going to last much longer than that. In fact, I would argue he'd probably be the first defensive player off the board. And so if there's 3 quarterbacks taken, Will Anderson's probably going to be the first defensive player off the board, considering the issues now with Jalen Carter out there. It's real clear that this is the guy. So, if he's there at 5, I think Seattle takes him. If he's not there and 3 quarterbacks are off the board when Seattle's on the board at 5, Seattle has some choices to make. I think that, you're either taking best player available, which might not be a position of need for Seattle, or you're trading down a little bit, picking up additional picks, and then you can go ahead and take a player of your choice at that point. So it'll be interesting. So depending on which list you're looking at, the next player up on the board is Myles Murphy or Tyree Wilson. Both players have been speculated as being available for Seattle, and Seattle's choice at 5. They're, you're stepping down a little bit, so that 5th pick becomes diminished, I think, a little bit. Trading back a little, and they're there at 9, 10. That makes a little bit more sense. But what do you think of those 2 prospects?
I actually am coming to like Wilson more and more the more that I watch of him, which I had him below, on this, I had Myles Murphy ranked higher for most of this process, but the more of it I kind of get in to Wilson, I like his explosiveness off the edge. That first step's quick. He gets into the body of the offensive tackles, so that way he can, negate some of their length. He does some really good things with his hands that I like. I think he's a guy that's going to be productive, like very productive at the next level as a pass rusher. And I think the same as for Murphy. Murphy's also got a lot of those qualities. And maybe it's just because I've seen a lot of Murphy and I'm getting caught up on Wilson now. But I find myself thinking more highly of Wilson than Murphy in the recent going. But both are guys that are going to go, top 12.
I think go ahead.
I would say just both very good prospects at the next level.
I think what you're going to get in Tyree Wilson is the guy that's going to be able to set the edge for you a little bit stronger than Murphy. He defends the run a little bit more. He's heavier, 271, his wingspan is crazy at 86 inches. He's just a long, lean prospect when you look at him on the field. He's able to do a lot with that reach of his. And he's got a good bend to him too. So he can, set the edge for you, play the 5-tech, also get to the quarterback and affect the pass rush for you as well. I like him. Miles Murphy seems to be more of a pass rush specialist, even at the same size, basically. He's quite a bit faster. I think Tree Wilson was around 4.8 40. Miles Murphy is going to be in the 4.5 range, just to give you an idea there. So there's a little bit of a difference as far as the type of player, even though they're similar in size.
Yeah.
And I like Miles Murphy too. I mean, if the team's done their due diligence on Murphy and he's their guy, because he's a better scheme fit or whatever, I'm fine with that. It's just that 5 pick, man. We would have been in such a better position if we would have had that 3 overall pick that we were hanging out with, for a couple months there at the end of the season, and all of a sudden that last week it just flipped to the 5th pick. Makes it a little bit more interesting to me.
Yeah, but I think the 5th pick is still a great spot to sit, because Indy's going quarterback and Houston's going quarterback. So those 2 guys are you're losing 2 guys there. The Bears aren't. Arizona's not. And so you're going to have a couple of other players off the board at that point. But you're really looking where, 2 quarterbacks are going to be sitting there, 2 of the top 4 for the Seahawks at 5, and some really good defensive players. Not that they need it, but maybe the top offensive tackle in the game, unless that goes to Arizona, which wouldn't shock me. And if Arizona does go offensive tackle, then that's even more talent sitting there for Seattle. I think they're in a really good spot at 5, where I'm not real worried about it, because it gets Bryce Young off the board, so you don't have that question. And then it's a matter of who do you like most out of the other 3 guys? And there's a lot to like out of all 3 of them. So at quarterback, so I think there's just a lot of options. Both at quarterback, but then if they decide they don't want to go that route, there's a lot of really good defensive players.
And it also makes the 5th pick overall coveted for teams that are trying to get that last quarterback available, whether it's Will Levis or one of the other guys. A couple other prospects that are similar to Tyree Wilson and Murphy would be Keon White and Lucas Van Ness. Both players are similar. I like both a lot. I really like
both of them. These are guys that I am looking at, and I'm like, these feel Seahawky, and they feel, because I do kind of expect Seattle to go quarterback at 5 or drop back in to 8 if they think they can get one of the guys there. But I'm guessing it's probably at 5, and then. So that gets Wilson and Murphy off the board, right? So they now you're looking at Van Ness or Keon White as potential picks with that second first round pick, or maybe the first pick in the second round. Those are that's kind of where I'm expecting Seattle to go. Pass rusher is one of those 2, and if you can get either of those guys in that spot, you're getting a really nice player. And you're getting them without using, a top 10 pick on it. Lucas Van Ness is the type of guy that in a different year where there was maybe fewer elite pass rushers in the draft could easily go top 10. But this year he's in a class where there's a lot of elite pass rushers. So he's going to go somewhere 20 to 24. Okay.
He's a very diversified player as well.
Absolutely. I really like him. I really like him.
I mean, he's a guy that you can tuck inside as well at the 3-tuck occasionally. He's just that strong and he's that quick. If you're looking in kind of the Will Anderson direction, another player that's going to be on your radar is Will McDonald, the 3-4 outside linebacker from Iowa State, 6'4", 245 pounds, is a little faster than Will Anderson at 4'6", 1. I understand that the Seahawks are interested in Will McDonald. He's on their interview list and all that.
Honestly,
kind of
shouldn't every team be interested in Will McDonald?
Oh, that's true.
Right?
Yeah, I mean,
good player, good pass rusher, quite explosive as an athlete, more of a pass rusher than a true edge setter, but I don't care.
He's not terrible against the run.
No, he's not, and I'm not trying to say that he is, but he just to me he's a guy that he can get upfield and he can get upfield quick. He can make life hell for offensive tackles. And honestly, if there's a team that doesn't like him, I would question their GM.
I'd say if Seattle somehow or another, allows the draft to come to them, say they pick a quarterback and at 20, maybe it's an offensive guard, or a receiver or just something that you weren't expecting. And they need to come back to the defensive line in the second round. This is the type of guy that you're going to be looking at. And I think it'd be a great pick for like that first pick in the second round for Seattle. And Nolan Smith, the same sort of deal.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Nolan Smith, which we need to. Yeah. I mean, did you see his 40-yard dash?
Well, yeah.
4.39. That is faster than faster than all of the safeties in this draft and most of the wide receivers. And he's doing that as a defensive end. A guy who, he's more of an outside linebacker in this, but guy who's 6'2", 240, and runs like with that. I mean, that's just crazy speed.
People were talking about him being a little undersized, but he's got an 80-inch wingspan, and he's got 32 and 5/8-inch arms. As far as his vertical is concerned, he jumped out of the building. 41.5-inch vertical. Broad jump is 128 inches. Those are both 96 percentile.
He's undersized for a 4-3. He doesn't belong in a 4-3 defense because at that size, even if you're the 7 tech, you are being asked to hold your own against an offensive tackle in the run and not get pushed. And I don't think at under 240 he's going to do that. But as an outside
line, a little bit of weight, muscle when he gets into the NFL as well. So 245, he's still going to run a 4.4.
Yeah, but at 245, he's still going to get pushed around against the run. But as an outside linebacker, where he's off the line of scrimmage a couple of yards, setting the edge there becomes more about angles than it is about getting, being pushed backwards. It's about, getting upfield and not running past the play, things like that. And he'll be great as an outside linebacker in a 3-4. This is a guy that's a perfect 3-4 outside linebacker. And with that speed, you can do so much with him. You can run him in from anywhere. Put him in the middle and have him loop outside. You can put him outside, have him loop in the middle. You can just rush him off the edge. He's got great bend to get around the corner.
So when you're talking about draft philosophy and you're talking about the value of the 5th overall pick in the draft and what that could represent if you trade back a little bit, picking up an additional second round pick or maybe a late second, third and a third rounder for a drop back of just say 5 picks. Is that more valuable to Seattle? And then pick a guy instead of Will Anderson at 5, pick a guy like Nolan Smith at 37. Or
I think it is
where you drop back into the late 20s.
See, I think it is. And I think that's John Snyder's philosophy. And if you look at what he's done since coming to Seattle, I think that he would agree with the idea that it's more valuable because if you pick Will Anderson, that's almost a sure thing as a hit. But when it comes to wins and losses, if he gets hurt, your team's no better off. If you drop back a little bit and you get a guy like Nolan Smith in round 2 and also get, a player in round, let's say a Brian Breesy in round 1 after having dropped back, now you've got 2 players instead of 1. And if one of them gets hurt, during the season, you're still better than you were last, before the draft. And so that's why 2 players tend to be better than 1. So if you can do that kind of thing, typically you just can't do that with your entire team because you can only have so many rookies and young players. Otherwise there's no leadership. There's, there's a reason why you need vets. Right. And so, I do think that you can move back. I think moving back makes more sense unless there's a guy sitting there like a quarterback. You can't move back and get another quarterback, right?
Where
Those are
do
the
you
guys.
see a guy like Nolan Smith going in the draft, or a Will
Oh
McDonald,
man,
or a Lucas Van Ness?
all of these
Where do you
guys
have to get where do you have to get these guys?
So I think with Van Ness, you're looking at end of round 1. I don't know if he gets past like 26, 28. I would bet it's closer to 20. Nolan Smith is going to have less appeal because of his size or lack of size. He's a guy that fits 3-4 defenses only, and therefore all the 4-3s out there, which is more than half the teams, right? It's about 68% of the teams run a 4-3. You're looking at a guy whose primary skill set is as a pass rusher. But if you're drafting him as a weak side linebacker and expecting him to play off the line of scrimmage. And that's not really what he does best. Clearly he's athletic enough to do it, but he's going to have to learn it. And so I see because of that, because there's less teams that are going to covet him, he's going to drop a little bit. You might be able to get him mid round 2. But if you are running a 3-4 and you miss out on one of the top, 4 or 5 guys, God, Nolan Smith is going to look real nice to you.
Yeah. Not only a good combine tester, obviously he knocked it out of the park. They're probably the second or third best overall combine performance, I thought. Mm-hmm. In a little bit, we'll talk about one of the other ones. All right. Who do you want to talk about? Because there's a whole bunch of guys in the
there's so many in here,
third or fourth round that are just on the list.
I'm really interested. So I start looking at a little bit later. Because I'm like, okay, if the Seahawks do go quarterback and then they go defensive tackle and then they go, we need an interior offensive lineman. And so then it's like, okay, now you're in the 4th or maybe the 5th pick that Seattle has. So you're talking in the, the 60s or the 80s. And you start looking in that range. Zach Harrison out of Ohio State starts to look really interesting. A guy who I wouldn't say he tested great at the combine because he didn't, but his tape and his production at the collegiate level is really, really good. And I think he's a good athlete. And overall, and I just think that he's like one of those guys that you can just kind of plug in and just know that there's going to be production there for you.
I think another guy to watch out for on the pass rush specialist side, the outside linebacker guy, is Byron Young out of Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Had a great combine, 6'2", 250 on the shorter length side at 32.5-inch arms, but ran a 4.43 40, which is blazing for that size. And he had a great combine and good tape as well. Ade. The defensive line edge guy had a tremendous combine. He was one of the guys I was going to talk about with one of the top 3 workouts in the combine. You take a look at Nolan Smith, and then of course Richardson at the quarterback position, and then at the defensive line edge spot, he was one of the best testers there. Ran a 4.49 40 at 282 pounds. I was trying to look for his 10-yard split, and I think it was like a 1.51 or something like that. It was just nuts for that size. And
this is out of Northwestern, right?
Yes.
Yeah. With the name that I'm not going to try and pronounce either.
Adebaware, I think is his last name.
Yeah, Adetomiwa Adebaware. I said I wasn't going to try, and then I did. 282 pounds, but ran a 4.49 with it was a 1.61 split, which that's wide receiver. Okay. That's wide receiver. Cornerback level. Burst off the line, but this guy's doing it at 282 pounds.
And his vertical and his broad jump were both in the 96th percentile. The guy's just an athletic freak and played at the Senior Bowl, did really well there, came into the combine, did what he needed to do to get himself on the map. This is a guy I think that Seattle would definitely be interested in, especially if you missed out on the Van Ness earlier. You miss out on Tyree Wilson. You still want a guy to come in and help Nuwasu out in a rotation. He would be a perfect fit for that.
Yeah, but I don't even see him as an outside linebacker because of his size. He's a defensive end. Like even in a 3-4 where you're looking at guys
Right. He's a
you're not
base
looking at outside
edge guy.
linebacker, but he's a guy that's going to be a Shelby Harris, but with
You think
crazy speed.
Yeah. Okay. I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, Shelby Harris was a 5 tech. So, I mean, that's kind of the, in a standard 3-4 at the bare front, Shelby Harris is kind of the prototype 5 tech. And you get a guy like this who can play that same position, do that, but does it with so much more speed and explosiveness. And that's not to say Shelby Harris isn't explosive. He's a really, really good player. But the athleticism that this guy shows at 282 pounds is just unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is better than Frank Clark level athleticism.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Crazy. All right. So there's a whole bunch of other guys. Derek Hall, the outside linebacker out of Auburn, tested really well, plays well. He'd be a guy. BJ Ojulari out of LSU, another guy. Felix Ozuma out of Kansas State is a guy that's everyone's kind of looking at as being a fringe third round.
What do you think about Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame?
He strikes me as more of a 4-3 defensive end. A guy that can set the edge, defend the run really well. Doesn't do a lot when it comes to the pass rush, although he can kind of do that, but it's not his specialty. He's a very good player who, over the course of 3 years, just had racked up tons of stats. He's always stuff in the stat sheet, as far as solo tackles, pressures, sacks, 7 to 10 sacks per season for 3 straight seasons. I mean, ultra productive and consistent. I'm just not exactly sure if he fits in a 3-4.
See, I would agree. He's kind of that. He's not big enough to be the 5 tech, the Shelby Harris type, but he's not quick enough to be Uchenna Nwasu on the, as an outside linebacker. He's kind of stuck in between in Seattle's scheme, and therefore I don't think they'd be interested, but he's ranked really high. If you look across the draft media, he's a guy who's thought of, mid round 2 kind of player. And you're right about his production. It's just been very consistent for over 3 years. I think there's going to be a lot of desire of NFL teams to get him, but I'm not sure as far as scheme fit goes that he's a good fit for Seattle.
Yeah. And again, I could be wrong. Pete Carroll tends to love these type of players, guys that are scheme diverse, multiple, if you will. And we'll see. Who else, Keith? Nick Huberg is an interesting player out of Wisconsin. He's 240 pounds, but everyone had him pegged as kind of being an edge rushing specialist. I see him converting actually into more of a middle linebacker in the NFL and possibly going later than projected. Yeah.
As a middle linebacker, interesting.
Yeah.
Rather than as an edge player, it's interesting you say that because you look at, Bobby Wagner was an outside linebacker in college and is a Hall of Fame
interesting
middle linebacker, a guy that made that and made it instantly and without a problem. So a lot of times it's like, he's not an inside linebacker, but that doesn't mean you get the right guy, especially if they're a sure tackler. And it's like, okay,
people have said the same thing about Nolan Smith, believe it or not, talking about moving Nolan Smith inside. Yeah, interesting.
That is interesting.
Just because he's a shorter armed guy, he's like 32 and 0.63 arms. Hand size is 9 inches. He's 6'2", 238. He's real fringy, but he's got that excellent speed at 4.39. So he's got that pedigree that you want to be able to turn loose. But if he's a sure tackler and can tackle in open space, agility, sideline to sideline, breakdown blocks, etc., maybe. I don't know. Another guy I wanted to mention that was a tremendous tester. I very much enjoyed watching this guy at the combine and didn't know about him prior was Yaya Diaby, the the edge specialist. Where is he from? I don't even know.
Louisville. He's out of
Louisville.
Louisville.
Yeah, he tested so well. He looked so fluid in drills against all the other guys that were out there. I just thought, man, he really made a name for himself. He like had his vertical was crazy. He had a broad jump that was really nasty. He's got huge hands at almost 10.5 inches, good length at almost 34-inch arms with a 81.25-inch wingspan. His 10-yard split was crazy at 1.56. His 40 was 4.51 at 263 pounds.
At 263 pounds.
I know, right? This guy's just, for me, came out of nowhere. I mean, you go look at the big boards, he's still hovering in the 210, 225 range, 7th round guy. And I really do believe that those traits get him drafted in like the 3rd or 4th round.
I was gonna say, yeah, this guy won't get past round 4.
He's my new favorite, though, as far as a draft guy that I'm looking at in the 6th or 7th round, because nobody knows about him yet, but he'll be drafted soon enough.
He's a guy that needs some coaching. Just going through and looking at notes, his use of his hands when he's in pass rush is like non-existent, and that's just coaching. Like, he needs to be taught how to use his hands to get disengaged, because he's already like explosive and productive and whatnot. And then you actually get him some real coaching on how to do other things with his hands and his other moves and that kind of stuff. And this guy's gonna just go crazy at the next level. So
one of the other guys that I really liked out of the combine, tested extremely well, looked well, heard nothing but good things about him, was Jalen Redmond, 291 pounds, 6'2". He's kind of a tweener. He's going to be either a 5 tech or 3 tech.
Mm-hmm. I've got him as a 3 tech pass. Yeah, an interior guy.
On his strength and you know, where they decide. He looked really good. I would say, go look at him and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, if he's at that size,
if he's a
Keith,
fluid athlete, I think we've covered quite a bit.
Oh yeah, we have. I mean, there's so many names, and I know if you're still listening, like, there's so many names here. And that's kind of the point. This is Bill and I prepping for draft coverage and mock drafts and what happens at the draft and all of that. This is a really good class of defensive ends.
Yeah.
I can't state that strongly enough. We're talking 3 guys in the top 12, and that's even with a run of quarterbacks that's going to go in that same range.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking probably 9 or 10 guys in the top 2 rounds. And then that depth just keeps going in every round.
That's the real key here, is you can get some really good talent in the 1st through 3rd round, but if you're really looking for depth and rotation guys, you can find that quality all the way through the 5th round. And I just mentioned a couple of guys, Jalen Redmond and Yadabi. Those guys are amazing. Moro Ajamo, the defensive 3 tech, had an amazing workout at the combine. He's another name that I really liked out of there. I could just go on and on.
Even a guy that we haven't even mentioned, like Ali Gay out of LSU, right?
Mike Morris out of Michigan. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah, there's such a long list of guys. Brendan Cox Jr. out of Florida.
Right. A small school guy like Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State.
Yeah.
Ultra productive speed guy.
Well, even
236 pounds.
Thomas Incoom out of Central Michigan. Like, there's all these. There is a lot of guys at
a lot of flavors
this year, and so many of them are going to be good. This is going to be a really nice draft class if you need an edge rusher, which honestly every team needs an edge rusher. In fact, most teams need 2. Because you can never have enough pass rushers in the NFL, not in today's NFL.
Yeah, I think Seattle's really going to help themselves this year, for sure.
Yep.
All right. Coming up after this show, I think we're going to do a post-combine mock draft, which will be fun. Kind of get our gears going again after the combine. See if we had any changes compared to the last time we did that. And then we'll keep moving through the defense. Next show, I believe, would be middle linebackers, middle linebacker types in a 3-4.
Yep. Interior.
And that's a need.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was a need before the Jordan Brooks injury. With the Jordan Brooks injury, there's a lot to be concerned about that position. So
yeah, probably the neediest position right now on the team, except for center. I mean, center is going to get solved. That's an easier one to solve. Getting competency at the middle linebacker position for the Seahawks is critical to their success this year.
Agreed.
So, all right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. You know where the show's at. When you find it, hit that subscribe button and share it. So until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWC Hawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.